Welcome to Voodoo Whiskey Gaming, and this is my late review of Steelrising. I played on the Xbox Series X. It's also available on the Series S, PC, and PlayStation 5. So, you play as the Aegis or Aegis. You're an automat, which is basically a robot. And in my opinion, automat is a terrible name for robots. The game takes place during the French Revolution, or an alternate version of the French Revolution. You are sent to Paris by Marie Antoinette because she fears what the king has done because, well, he unleashed a bunch of automats on the people. And there are a few minor twists and turns, but not unlike most Souls-like games, story is quite sparse. Although I will say it's a little easier getting to story bits and real story bits in this game than, a lot of these games. So let's get into the audio, and the first thing I'm going to say is the music's pretty good. I didn't hate the music. I also think the sound effects are pretty good. I think they do a good job with making the sound effects fit the world, fit the enemies, fit your character. The one thing I do think sucks is the voiceover work. It's pretty shit. So, yeah. I mean, it's far from the worst I've heard. I've definitely heard considerably worse, but it's also not going to be, winning any awards, in my opinion. Let's get into the gameplay mechanics and whatnot, and as I mentioned, this is a Souls-like. Soulsbourne, whatever you want to call it. It is that style of game, and it's not the greatest one. I will say it's not the most challenging thing I've ever run into. It's actually relatively easy. I think it's a bit harder than something like Fallen Order, but it's definitely not on the level of any of the From Software ones, or most other Soulsborne games. But it operates pretty much the same. You fight enemies can easily wreck you, and honestly, I found the grunts and those kind of things, just the ones I'm fighting between bosses, to be far more deadly than, well, the bosses. I definitely died more to the enemies getting from point A to point B, but you have your checkpoints, and at those you can upgrade your character, you can upgrade your weapons, you can buy stuff, etc. Beating enemies gives you, basically souls that you can use in all of those manners. And honestly, from that standpoint, it was a perfectly functional game. It wasn't amazing, but it also wasn't, horrible. I think one of the bigger downsides is actually probably a programming issue. The enemies are sporadic, they're random. And what I mean by that is they'll be engaging you and you'll be getting ready for their next attack or whatever, and they'll just stop and turn around and start walking away and then decide to come back to you. So it completely throws off all rhythm in the combat, which that's just shit. It's absolutely horrible. It doesn't help this game. It fucks with the flow. That's not something you want in a Souls-like. Now let's move on to the controls. And for the most part, I think they are functional, although I did run into some issues that were just weird. Actually, definitely led to me getting killed. So I would press a button, and like most Souls-like, if you press attack 3 times, your character's going to attack whether you need to dodge or heal or whatever. Which, that makes sense. I am used to that. The problem is when you do get hit and it's supposed to interrupt your stuff, and it does interrupt your stuff, if you happen to hit the heal button or dodge button and still get hit, once you recover, your character will then dodge or try and heal, even though that movement should have been disrupted. So I guess maybe that's more of a programming thing. I don't know. I'm putting it here. The controls are for the most part responsive. The camera's good. The movement's good. I did have some times where I felt like the buttons weren't as responsive as I wanted though. And then there's that weird issue of things that are interrupted suddenly still triggering. That's problematic. Let's get into the graphics and visuals, and I'm going to say right away that I actually think the automats, the way they're designed, is pretty cool. Including yours, it's a little weird, but at the same time, I do think it's actually a pretty neat looking thing. I think the world design is actually pretty damn cool. I really like that historical vibe. I like that era. I like the architecture. I like how they made it war-torn when you're in Paris because of the automats going around. And I think they did a good job bringing that to life. I think it's a very colorful game, which I actually enjoyed. I think the animations are pretty cool and weird and robotic, and they work for the robots. The human characters, on the other hand, look like shit. They're garbage, man. They just don't look good. They don't look like something that belongs on PS5 and Xbox Series. They look like something that belongs on like early PS4, early Xbox One. And the hair just looks like shit, and the way it like disrupts the background looks like garbage. It's just not good looking. The animation for the humans is alright, it's not phenomenal. Like, the humans being in the game and you having to go and talk to them and stuff, that actually drags shit down because they're noticeably bad looking and they kind of take you out of the rest of it when you're getting immersed. Also, the other thing is, I definitely had, like, objects in the world popping in. Like, not important objects, but nonetheless, they were popping in, like vines on the ground and stuff wouldn't be there, and then suddenly they would be. I also think the maps and the debris in the world could be better laid out. There are way too many areas, and maybe it's a movement thing, where you just get hung up on shit and it can really fuck you over. And sometimes it's a bit overly clustered in an area that should be more open, or it should be easier to move through. So let's get into the wrap up, and to put it simply, the game is fine. And that's the best I can say about it. At its best, it reaches fine. If you're one of those hardcore Souls-like players who just loves getting the shit kicked out of them, the hardcore challenge that they provide, Steelrising is going to be really easy to you. I'm not one of those guys, and I've got to say I found it to be one of the easier Souls-like games. But if you're looking for a place where you want to like dip your toe in and you're curious, it's not a bad place to start. So that's my recommendation. It's kind of a split recommendation. Okay, so in the comments down below, why don't you tell me what's a Souls-like game that you're excited for? And as always, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button. And if you like what I'm doing in general, share and subscribe. Have a good one.